I am Vero, and you're watching Modern Immigrant. Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of Modern Immigrant. Every Monday, we're here having an amazing conversation about immigration, an amazing conversation that's going to inspire you and make you feel that you're not alone in this journey. So, today, I had the opportunity to interview and had an amazing time with Ana Flores. Ana is the founder of We All Grow Latina, a place that I know a lot of you know and that a lot of you love. Ana was able to share with us her immigration story, was able to share with us how it was for her growing up in El Salvador and also coming to the US pretty often to visit her dad. We also talk about the inspiration behind We All Grow, how it started, which to me was fascinating to learn a little bit more about that story. And it really gave me this amazing feeling that we can create these spaces, we can create the spaces we need. We don't need to, be looking for those things out there. We can have it right here with us and within our own community. We also explore the concept of Latinidad and how that has been really helpful to her in order to feel rooted to a place. So I hope you enjoy this interview. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching this, you can also listen to these interviews on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and all of those podcast platforms. So remember to subscribe so you can get a notification when there's a new episode, and that way you don't miss any of these amazing conversations. We also have an Instagram at Modern Immigrant where I'm pretty active sharing about my guests and also sharing a little bit about my own journey with immigration. So again, thank you for being here. Enjoy, and I'll see you next Monday. Bye. And Ana, I am so happy that you're here with us today at Modern Immigrant. Welcome, bienvenida.
Gracias, thanks for having me.
This is really exciting, and I usually start every interview by asking my guests what's their story with immigration. How did that immigration started? If it was you, your parents, that way we get to know you a little better in that area.
It was my parents. My dad was very young. I want to say, young, like 2021, when my parents are from El Salvador.
Okay.
And my dad got a job offer, or kind of like a job placement, at the Salvadoran consulate in Houston. Wow. And that's what took him to Houston. My mom kind of followed him, and then I came. But actually, what really defined my immigration story was that I was born in Houston, but they divorced when I was 6 years old, and it was actually the best thing that could have happened, because that meant that my mom decided to move back to El Salvador with myself and my sister. And my dad stayed in Texas, in Houston, and he still lives there, and he has his family and everything. But that meant that I grew up in El Salvador, but I would go visit my dad every year and every other Christmas to Houston. So that's how I grew up, learning both languages at the same time and really navigating both cultures completely at the same time. So I've never been from one place or the other. I've been from both, always.
Yes, that is so interesting. I feel like a lot of immigration stories are either one side or the other, right? Like the person that was born in the US and still feel connected with their roots through their parents, but didn't have the experience as you to, also grew up in El Salvador, in Latin America. So I think that gives you the best and also maybe some challenges, like the best of the two worlds, but also feeling that you weren't from here, from there. Was that ever a challenge, or you felt, as I say, like we're from here and from there?
Yeah. So I realized it a few years ago with my therapist. That it was something that I never felt rooted. I've been very much of a gypsy spirit. Like it's really hard for me to plant roots, and that was something I was really feeling. I mean, even right now, I'm in Mexico, right? As we're recording this, I'm in Playa del Carmen, and because I also feel that I'm from Mexico. Like my soul is from Mexico. When I visited Mexico City for the first time 20 years ago, I was living in Miami. I fell in love with Mexico, and I just felt I was from here. So I uprooted myself and quit everything and moved to Mexico City.
That's wonderful.
And from there, 5 years later to LA. So I'm always gonna, and LA is where I've been settled for the longest. It's been 15 years. Why? Because now I'm a mom,
Mm.
and setting that, but I hadn't realized, and actually nobody has ever asked me that, so that's really good. Uh, and actually how I always thought, right, it's so beautiful that I can connect with all these worlds at the
Mhm.
same time, right? And that's also why I think part of why We All Grow Latina is so beautiful, because it's so much born out of me, right, and who I am, and that, and this understanding that I have with the Latina community at a
Mm.
whole. I'm not going to say that I know everybody's experience, I can live
Right.
everybody's experience, but I have that empathy for the
Mm.
experience, because I can relate to many sides of the border, of the culture
Mhm.
identity, of etc. But then at the same time, for me, it has meant that I really don't place roots anywhere,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something really powerful that you said about the connection you made with Mexico, because I think we grew up with this idea that we need to feel identified and rooted to the place where we're born. But for so many of us, that doesn't happen for many reasons. We just don't feel that connection, or maybe something happened, or maybe our parents were from another country. So the fact that we can connect with another country and still feel that love and that passion, and it can become our home, I think it's like great news, right? That we can later in life find that amazing place. And it sounds like for you, it's many places too. So I think that's beautiful.
For me, it's many
Mm.
places, and I don't know, it gives me that. I'm also very aware always of the collective,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
beyond that, so I think in a sense that's why, you question yourself. I'm 48 years now, and you start questioning what you're not blaming
Mm.
your upbringing, but questioning like why, what I know are my skills and
Mm.
my passions now, and what I'm good at, and what I'm meant to do in this world.
Mm.
You start realizing how even the place where you were born and all of those decisions that were made along the way, even before you were making those decisions yourself consciously, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether soul decisions, your parents, your family, the lineage, how all of that has been meant to get you to the place where you are today.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to ask you, I think this is something that comes in a lot of interviews, the feeling that a lot of immigrants have of not feeling rooted to a place. And I wonder if you do anything that helps you find that, and that helps you feel that you belong to a place. Is there anything that helps? I mean, I know the language is a big one, the food, but I want to ask you that.
Um, Good question. So listen, so even when I had my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
so actually when I came back to the United States after living in Mexico, I always knew that I could only go back to the United States if it was LA or California.
Mm-hmm.
That was very important to me. I had already lived in Florida. I went to the University of Florida, Miami, but where I felt that I would still be able to carry something with me, and still feel complete and whole, I needed to have my Latinidad as I define Latinidad, because Latinidad is very personal. So what for me was in LA, right? Was
Mm-hmm.
California, was having the mountains, the ocean, the people, the food.
Yeah.
So for me, what grounds me is Latinidad.
Mm.
Absolutely. And then it was my daughter when she was born, and she loves to take credit for even the company and the career now, because she hears me say this story all the time. Right when she was born was when I launched Spanglish Baby, which was the
Mm-hmm.
blog that kind of started it all. Spanglish Baby was a blog for parents raising bilingual and bicultural kids. So I launched it with a partner, Roxana Soto. But I really came to her with the idea because I was a mom in LA with her dad and my husband at the time, with no parent, no family around, no friends. I was the
Mm.
first of my friends having kids, even though we were 35 by then.
Yeah.
And doing it alone in a city as big as LA is really difficult. Plus, in the middle of a recession.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so I couldn't get help. It was really difficult. And for me, what was most important was to make sure that she had the same skill set that I was capable of giving her, that
Mm.
my parents gave me, that they don't even remember doing, but it's teaching me both languages.
Mm.
And
Wow.
making sure for me, what was important was so that she could have that connection with her abuela,
Mm-hmm.
her oma in Mexico, her cousins, that whenever she would go to El Salvador or come to Mexico and see her cousins and her family, she wouldn't feel like the outsider.
Yeah.
And she's still la gringa, and she will always be la gringuita everywhere she goes. And she laughs
That's
at it now, right? Con amor. But
yeah.
but there wasn't that she could connect with them directly,
Mm,
and that grounded me. That was important to me, that to make sure that I was giving her that skill, but more than a skill, that connection
yeah.
to who we are.
That's wonderful. And it's honestly like it sounds as maybe people that don't have this dual language or culture, they might
Mhm.
see it as, yeah, obviously you're going to speak to your kid to your first language, but it can really be a struggle. So I really give you
It's not
credit.
easy at
It's
all.
not easy because you're in a different country. Sometimes
Yeah.
they don't want you. I recently interviewed a wonderful guest that she was saying that her daughter, when she was like 12 years old or 13-year old, she said, Mom, don't speak to me in Spanish. Like, don't, right?
Hmm.
Like, they can make
Yeah.
those decisions. So, to continue that work, and it's hard, but I think it's a wonderful gift that she's going to carry for the rest of her
But you
life.
know what happens too? That it's not only the gift of language, but us. It's hard no matter what you do.
Mm,
But if to do that, you also need to give them the gift of the love of the culture. They need to understand why.
yeah.
It's not just the language that their parents speak, because a child is always going to rebel against what their parents are. Obviously, we're never, we're not going to be cool. And and there's always going to get to the point where they hear. For her, it was when she was 4 years old,
Wow.
and she was sitting in the back of a car. And when she started, she had started her preschool that was all English,
Mm,
so that was the first time she was completely submerged in the majority language, right? And and that she realized that, wait, the rest of the world speaks differently than we do, even though we had friends in Spanish and the home it was only Spanish and everything. That was, one moment
mhm.
when she realized, like, no. And she told me in Spanish, yo ya nunca más voy a hablar español, yo solo hablo inglés. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, you do that. Right? Pero fue un
Yeah.
berrinche.
Wow.
And yeah, they it's so along with it, it's that
Mm,
love of why
mhm.
why they need to have a why the language is important.
I love that. Yeah. And to know that, I mean, I'm not a parent, I'm a mom, but to know that you can continue to give them those amazing cultural, you know, the value that your culture has without maybe pressing on the language, because eventually they are gonna get back to that, right? Like they're
Oh
gonna love
yes,
that.
always.
Yeah. So, and Anna, two big things that I want to ask you. You already mentioned the blog that kind of started this, that was before We All Grow Latina, but I know it transformed to We All Grow. And I want to hear a little bit about what was the motivation to moving from the blog that was for bilingual kind of parents and sharing that experiences to what we know of We All Grow Latina today.
So they were two different things at the time, but
Okay.
one motivated the other. So I was a TV producer for many years. I actually studied
Mm,
that in college and the University of Florida. And my first job was Univision in
mm,
Miami at the network. And then I moved to Mexico, and that's kind of when I started my entrepreneurship without knowing, because that wasn't a word back then.
mm,
I was mostly a freelancer or a crazy person that was on my own. And so for many years, and I created content by and for Latinos. So
mm,
Univision, MTV Latin America in Mexico, Mundos, which is now Miss Universo in LA.
mhm.
And then when I had my daughter, I did the thing that employers don't want you to do, but he was my friend, and I was like, I'm not going to go back. I want to try to be a mom full time and see what that looks like. And then a few months later, the recession hit, and like hit our home really hard. So here I am with a baby at home, right? Like I said, with no work. My husband
Wow.
had lost all his clients too. It was one of the toughest times we've had. But the thing is that Latinas, we're resilient, right?
Mhm.
We know what to do.
Yeah.
And that's when I discovered the world of blogging. And since I didn't really have a close community anymore, because we had just recently moved to LA, we had only been there 2 years. I found this community online, and I started reading all these different mom blogs. But I wasn't finding mom blogs that spoke about my experience
Mm,
as a Latina mom wanting to raise a bilingual, bicultural child. And then I realized, wait, I know how to do this. I create content, and I'm
right.
actually not that bad of a writer. I didn't believe it back then.
Mm,
I was like, okay, I think I can. So I reached out to one of my best friends from college, who was actually an Emmy winning journalist,
wow.
TV journalist. So that's why Emmy. But she was a writer. And I was like, okay, we'll do it together, right? And she was going through the same thing pretty much that I was, the recession, the baby, the Spanish, all of that. So we got together, we launched Spanglish Baby. We really didn't need much. Like
Mm.
there was just blogs that I was following. I was Googling everything. I was learning on my own. There wasn't anybody that was teaching us how to do this. And the
Wow.
question was always, okay, fun, cute little mommy blogger. How are you going to monetize? How are you going to live off this?
Yeah.
And we're in the middle of the recession, right? So I started getting a little bit of freelance gigs, finally production. But every time I would go into those freelance gigs, and I'm talking like MTV Movie Awards, like really cool big things, that I was like, okay, I finally made it. I'm in LA in the big leagues, right? But all I wanted was to get back home to my little blog.
Wow. Amazing.
All I wanted was to do that. And I was like, okay, there's something more here, right? And the more we started building community and meeting other Latina mom bloggers, the thing is that back in 2009, when we launched Spanglish Baby, there was very few bloggers, and most of them were mom bloggers, especially in the Latina world. There was like a couple of fashion bloggers. And we were all communicating with each other. We would find each other via comments and via Twitter. And we would just start talking like that and just building community and helping each other, like, how do you do this, how do I do that, like, did you find out about this? And then we would start seeing that the general market bloggers were monetizing and they were working with brands.
Wow.
So I realized that I started attending some of those conferences and getting more invited and being like the Latina token, which, and that when you're the Latina token, but you know what you're getting out of it, y tú le vas a sacar provecho, it's a good place to be.
That's okay. Yes.
Right? That's okay, because you're conscious about what you're doing, and they also, it was authentic the way the invitations were coming. So I was like, okay, I'm learning from them. And they even started telling me, why don't you do what we're doing in our space, but for Latinas specifically? Because the marketing to Latinas it's different. We need to make sure that the marketing and the way that the messaging is coming to us is catered to us, and done right. So there was a handful of blogger networks, which now we know is influencer marketing. So I decided to launch the first blogger network to connect Latina bloggers with brands. And by launch, I mean kitchen table, laptop, still no money, Google Forms, a Google form that said a blog that I created on my own with a logo that a friend did, who was also a mom blogger. And I put out a form and I said, if you are a Latina blogger and you want to work with brands, sign up. It was called Latina Bloggers Connect. And I will do my best to get us work. But also, I can't get us work unless we're all at the top of our game, unless we're all learning and being as professional as possible, and all the time, like, learning from each other. So that's when I wrote at the end, because when one grows, we all grow. And that from the very beginning, the first blog post I wrote, that came up. And that just became our motto, and that just became our reason of being, because we would make sure that we were always connecting back then via Twitter parties and having conversations about how to help each other grow, open doors for each other. If I had a great campaign, I would see how to bring somebody else on board and recommend them. And that just started scaling and growing into what we know as influencer marketing.
Yes.
How wonderful. And then 5 years later, we rebranded to We All Grow once we launched the summit. So the We All Grow Summit in 2015 was really where our mission became visible, of elevating our voices and stories really became visible when we created really what it was, a safe space at the beginning for Latina content creators to come together. But then by the next year, it just started evolving into entrepreneurs, activists, poets. I mean, whoever just felt Latina, who identified as Latina, who really just wanted to be in a room with other chingonas that were there to support you.
How amazing is to hear that the power that community can have, right? Like you said, how you started, with your laptop, with a friend helping you with the logo, and what we know today. And it's really beautiful to really see that there was just such a big need for people to connect and to find, that voice. And I think that's what really, I feel really passionate about We All Grow Latina. And I think it's because of that, because you do find community, and it's hard to find community when you are, a minority, when you're an immigrant, when you're a Latina, when you don't see yourself in the media and in the TV. So I think what you're sharing and your story can really inspire a lot of us, and I include myself, that we're starting, right, and that we want to find that community to see that it's possible, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
gonna be pretty at the beginning or easy,
Mm-hmm.
but as you
Mm-hmm.
said, that was where you wanted to be doing that work.
And there's still a lot of, there's so much opportunity
Mm.
still right now, and what community is, and what we, as Latinas need as community, right? And our specific needs and the niches. And are we in tech? Are
Mm-hmm.
we in, in media? Are we in
Yeah.
journalism? Are we in medicine? And I
Mm-hmm.
keep seeing these groups and these silos appear, and it's so important that we're finally understanding the power of that, like, mentorship
Mm-hmm.
and helping each other from other women that get us, because
Mm.
it's hard within our own, like, in, communities, as far as like family communities. Sometimes it is really difficult because their experience has been so
So
different
different.
than
Mm-hmm.
ours, and they come from a loving place to want to protect us.
Mm.
But most of the time, right, they don't understand that the risks that they took as immigrants, right, are the risks that we now need to take in the decisions that we make to go towards our dreams and our growth. And that doesn't mean that we don't value the risks that they took
Mm.
for us, but that doesn't define that our life has to then be zero risk, and that safety
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't really translate in what I am supposed to bring to the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Earlier in the interview, you mentioned that Latinidad, it's different for everyone, right? Like everyone's gonna define what it is to be a Latina in this world, especially in the USA, in a different way. So I would love to hear your definition of that. Of what does it mean for you to be a Latina?
So it's hard to define. It's a feeling, right? It's like every feeling that's so abstract, it's so hard to define. But for
Mm.
me, being Latina is, for me, it is my language, but I recognize that it is not the language for everybody. And for me, what is that language? Is Spanish. Like, I mean, me encanta.
Yeah.
It is being able to navigate two worlds. It
Mm.
is being able to have that empathy and that perspective of the world, that is not defined by nationalism.
Mm-hmm.
For me, my Latinidad is bien salvadoreña, es bien americana, norteamericana,
Mm.
es bien sentirme mexicana, no? It's that my accent in Spanish is undescribed. Like, it's not Salvadoran, it's not Mexican, it's not,
Yeah, that's
my
the
Latinidad
beauty.
es la
Yeah.
yeah, es la
Mm-hmm.
música que me gusta escuchar, right? Mi hija siempre, ay, ya baja tu música latina. Yes.
Yes.
And one day you're going to remember me for that.
Yeah.
Every time she'll hear Natalia Furcada
Oh
in
my
20 years, she's going to
goodness.
be like, that's my mom. Or,
My idol. Yeah.
Carla Morrison, that's my mom. Um,
Amazing.
it's that, it's our
Mm-hmm.
stories, it's our connections that are really difficult to describe. And
Mm.
other than being, when we are together, we know what it is that brings us together.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that it's personal because I cannot, I can relate. I don't know if relate is the right word, but I cannot relate to the experience of like a
Mm-hmm.
Dominicana growing up in Queens, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right, but still, or a Dominicana Afro Latina growing up in Queens or in Belize or in Panama, it's a very different experience
Mm-hmm.
from like a white
Mm-hmm.
Latina in Argentina. No,
Right.
it is very, very different. But at the same time, put us all in a room and we connect. And there's something that incredibly connects within each other. And whether it's the food, it's the los dichos de nuestras madres y
Mm-hmm.
abuelas,
Mm-hmm.
the music that we listen to, like,
Yeah.
there's always something that brings us back together.
And that's what we need to really go back to. Seriously, like in a world that is kind of like making us be all the time apart and have, even if we have different ideas, I think that's the beauty of the Latinidad. And I know it has a beautiful side, but I also want to ask you what have been hard for you, like in the sense of not feeling represented or finding diversity or just challenges of being a Latina in the USA. Because even though you were born here, you said you were going, you grew up in El Salvador and you were kind of back and forward. And then not feeling from here or from there. I wonder if you face challenges here. I know you did, because I think We All Grow Latina wouldn't be here without challenges, right? But what were some of those?
Challenges we always face, and
Mm-hmm.
definitely in life. But in that regard specifically, I've cheated.
What do you
I've
mean?
never placed myself
Mm,
in a white space,
okay. Yeah, I
in a
love that.
non-Latina white space, right? Because there's white Latinas are white. There's whiteness in Latinidad as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, uh, I've never placed myself in a non-Latinx place. I've always
Wow.
been, and even when I was in college in the University of Florida,
Mm.
my roommates were Latinas, my group was Latina. I would go to my classes and back to my world, right?
Wow.
So I've
Yeah.
always existed and create. That's why I had the need of creating a space for
Mm-hmm.
me, even for my business to exist within that world. And it could be an echo chamber, or it can be a celebration. It could be your safe space,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I know that I don't function, and when I have, and maybe when I've tried, maybe it was with like a boyfriend in
Mm-hmm.
college, that was non-Latino, etc. And
Yeah.
there was always something that wouldn't click,
Mm-hmm.
and there was always something that was missing of me that wasn't complete. So I've always found the places where I feel complete, and those places have been
I love that.
surrounded by my Latinos. So that's why I started my career
Mm.
in Univision in Miami. Like what
Right.
more, right?
Yeah.
So directly, and then like I said, that's why when I came back to the States, it was LA when LA called us, but
Mm.
it was Los Angeles, and it was immediately, even like I said, when I started the blog, and we were certainly a minority in the blogging
Mm-hmm.
world, I created a
Mm-hmm.
table for us, and I created a space for us.
Yeah.
So whether I can exist in all spaces, where I feel whole is
Mm.
where I am within Latino. So that's how I've cheated the
Mm-hmm.
system for myself.
I love it. I think that's really smart. And I think that's also, I mean, that just reminds us on the importance of creating those spaces, right? As you did. Because if we have the option, like I currently work at an agency here in Seattle that's so diverse, and I'm a counselor, and I'm the only immigrant, but there's people from different countries and different races, and I feel like I chose that place because of that reason, right? Like I
Hmm.
felt like I struggle with that, a lot of things, not feeling that I belong in Seattle that's predominantly white.
Hmm.
But having those spaces, having that option, I guess the sad part is that there were not that many. Like the agency where I work gets just one in like 10 of
Hmm.
that are dominated by white people. But I think it's still, I like what you're saying, because it's giving us like that idea that if there's not that space that's created, you can create it. You can.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
That's
that's what we're
awesome.
going to have to do, because I really don't think it's healthy for us to try to exist in systems that weren't built for us.
Mm.
And we are completely capable of building our own systems. And
Mm.
right now, systems are being dismantled and deconstructed.
Yeah.
So who are going to be the ones building them back up at the way that actually
Mm-hmm.
are relevant to what the world looks like right now?
And I'm really interested in asking you this because you're working with the Latinx community really close. You have seen the change over the years. What do you see happening for Latinos in the USA in the future?
It's a complex question, right? Because the
Yeah.
future is changing before us every single day, and we're
Mm-hmm.
actually in a crossroads in life, that we've never been before, where everything is a choice.
Mm.
So we're honestly, if you want to, Star Wars or whatever you identify with, when we are in that direct battle of light, the light and the dark, and in this moment,
Mm-hmm.
we always are, but in this particular moment, we are being asked to make a choice.
Mm.
Just as humans, as a collective, everything. And for Latinos, that what I feel is just in general, we keep hearing so much about unity and having to come together and everything, but at the same time, we can't do that until we face the things that are keeping us separate. And in just the same way, like we're hearing it in the United States, right? That
Mm-hmm.
um, Biden, and I voted for Biden, but
Mm-hmm.
not to make this political, but
It's okay.
when the raid at the Capitol happened, that he, basically said like, this isn't America, and my reaction was like, no, this is exactly America. And if we continue working from a place of wanting to avoid the reality of who we are and what we have created, then we can't fix it. Just like it is in our personal life, it's the same
Mm-hmm.
outside. So when you ignore something, you can't work on something until you see it. And
Mm-hmm.
once you see it, you recognize it and you face it, and then you're like you face it with love, and you move forward to work on it, to do the
Mm-hmm.
work necessary to transform that within you. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing, like Latinidad, just like things are being dismantled here, and just as we're seeing all the racial problems that we have to face here, we have to do the same thing within our
Mm-hmm.
own countries.
Yeah.
And yes, the things that bring us together are beautiful, but there's also there is a lot of darkness in what classism is, and colorism and
Mm-hmm.
racism. I mean, we are a very racist society, and we are far from recognizing that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because we have always felt as the other. So how can the other also be racist?
Yes. Yeah.
You absolutely can. So I think for
Mm-hmm.
the future for us right now, the immediate is, I think, also facing our own reckoning,
Mm-hmm.
and the things that we have to fix before we can even start with the calls for unity.
Yeah. I love it. There's so much to learn and so much work to do together. We can't just always assume that we are on the right side always of the story. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's time to really, yeah, listen to others and try to. I mean, we're all living in the same country after all, so you have to
Mm-hmm. Yep.
find and as
We need to listen
Latinas.
to
Mm-hmm.
we need to listen to our indigenous amigas. We need to and amigos. We need to
Yeah.
listen to our black amigos, because listen, I come from El Salvador, where I was raised told that we don't have black Salvadorians because
Yeah.
the Constitution protected them from slavery, right? And it's not true. There are
Mm-hmm.
black Salvadorians, and I just really learned about that a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that understanding, that learning, that why were they oppressed and kept separate,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Why what is happening? And if that's obviously happening across the board. So we need to start dismantling understanding, having those conversations with our families,
Yeah.
and leading the way.
Mm-hmm. And I also think what you're saying this it's making me think about a lot of Latinas that or Latinx community that at some point hasn't felt welcome within the Latin community because they tell them, oh, you're not Latina enough or you don't speak Spanish. That's a huge one that I have
Mm-hmm.
explored in the podcast. And I think we go back to how you define a Latinidad. And I feel like I want every listener to maybe write that down, right? Like, what does it mean to you to be Latina? And it can be a really long list, it can be really short too. It can be just two things that connect you with that. And maybe you haven't visited Latin America or your parents' country, but that doesn't make you less
Mm-mm.
Latina or less from a
Well,
place. Mm-hmm.
it's you get who gets to choose your identity, right? You get
Yeah.
to choose your identity, and we can't be doing the same that has been done to us, right? And put into stereotyped into separate little categories and separate little buckets. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
in Latinidad isn't meant being Latina, because there's a lot of movements of like dismantling Latinidad, and I completely understand where that comes from, but it comes from that place of wanting to put one stamp,
Mm-hmm.
one name
Yeah.
over all of us. Yes, and we are We All Grow Latina, right, by choice, but it's because that is how you get to identify. But
Okay.
we do not label your experience.
Yeah. I love it. And Anna, just to I don't want to end this conversation. I think I'm having a really amazing time talking to you, but I do know that time is, very precious these days. I do want to ask you a last question, which is a message that I would like for you to, have this space to communicate with any immigrant, any person from the Latinx community, or anyone that have maybe feeling lonely or sad because they're not represented in the place where they're at right now. What's something that you would like to tell them or tell us?
There, we live in a really beautiful moment, and not right, but we can always find the beauty in every moment. But we live in a beautiful moment where it's really easy to find the people
Mm,
that that we can identify with, that can have a shared experience with us. And it really is up to us to get up and to find those connections,
mm,
and if not to create it. But it is your birthright, and it is your right now to feel loved. It
mm,
is your right to feel like you belong. It is your right to feel whole, and it is your right to find the people that will bring that feeling to you, that will honor that will honor the beauty in you. And they're out there waiting to honor you, right there. You will be able to find them. And sometimes the one of those choices, hard choices that we're being asked to make, is to let go of those people that don't make us feel whole, of those people that want to set us aside and make us feel like we are not enough. But we do have the spaces. There are spaces. There's plenty of spaces where you can find, and even these conversations, even listening to these podcasts, even that can make you feel whole. These are your amigas. That's why we call our community amigas.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's what we want you to feel like you have found your tus amigas, your group, your place.
And I do have to say that I have been able to, evidence that support that the Amigas communities have. I think I have like maybe half of our interviews have been with people and Amigas I have connected through the network, and I really see that I really see people wanting to help each other, and I don't see that many places like that. So to me have been an amazing opportunity to connect, to ask, and to see that there are other Amigas out there that want to have this conversation. So I'm really grateful that you open up that space for all of us.
Well, and I'm grateful that you actually are taking advantage of it, because that's exactly what it is. We're bringing a lot more to it, a lot more. We're going to be a lot more active and being able to be more proactive about making sure that these connections happen. But it's women like you that can take advantage of the spaces that are created that are really going to thrive in it.
And how can people join the Amigas network, or how can people find out more about We All Grow Latina?
So weallgrowlatina.com is our website. We are mostly active on Instagram, on Amigas. Amigas is amigas.weallgrowlatina.com. It is free to join. We have weekly events that are free, everything from coaching hours to office hours, to a lot of ebooks and resources and videos and classes that we've recorded over the last few years that are available for free on everything from healing to finances to SEO to content creation, etc. And we also have our new Amigas Masterclasses, which is our first paid offer to the community. And there's a new one every month. But if you don't join live, you can have lifetime access of the recordings. And those are the main spaces where we connect. We just jumped on Clubhouse and we are loving it.
Yes, I need to look it up. I recently got in, so I need to figure it out.
It's like live podcast.
That's what I heard. Yeah, people were telling me like you can just do it there, and I was like, okay, I would. I need to get in. I think it's a really good opportunity.
Yeah, it's just jumping in, and yeah, it really is just jumping in. But we that's where you can find us.
Cool. Thank you so much one more time, Ana, for making the time, for sharing your story with us. I feel really happy that we connected.
Likewise. Thanks for the invitation.